Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to start off by offering my greetings and welcoming everyone this evening. So thought I'd start off by telling a little bit of a story. So in Thailand, there are two main traditions of monks. One is called the Dhammayut, and one is called the Mahanikai. So the Dhammayut was started by a king of Thailand before he became the king. He had been a monk for many, many years, and he had started the Dhammayut sect, which was kind of a reform sect where they went back to really keeping the rules, the monks' rules, which we call the Vinaya, and really keeping that very strictly because it had kind of started to get lax. And and then when the Thai forest tradition came up and started by Lumpur Mun and Lumpur Sao. They were both Dhammayut monks. So the majority of the forest tradition is in the Dhammayut sect of monks. It's a much smaller sect, but they generally are known for keeping their rules very strictly. And particularly in the forest tradition, we really focus on keeping the rules very strictly. And so yeah, there are these two sects, and generally they kind of keep separate. We're all still properly ordained Buddhist monks, but they just kind of do their own thing. And so the forest tradition was mostly in the Dhammayut sect. So what would happen would be if a Mahanikai monk, one who had ordained in the Mahanikai sect, if he wanted to join the forest tradition, join in the um, with and go stay and study with Lumpur Mun, usually what he'd do is he'd do this thing. He'd reordain as a Dhammayut monk, and so that you had a lot of these famous disciples of Lumpur Mun. There's quite a few of them who had originally been Mahanikai monks, and when they went to see Lumpur Mun and wanted to stay with him and study, they reordained Dhammayut. And Lumpur Cha, he was a Mahanikai monk. And so when he decided that he really wanted to practice, really wanted to be a practice monk, he went off and found in search of Lumpur Mun, and he found him. And he stayed with him for a few days, and Lumpur Mun was giving him teachings. And then Lumpur Cha, he had asked, if he could reordain Dhammayut and become a Dhammayut monk. And Lumpur Mun said no. He said he wanted to have at least some disciples who were Mahanikai. And so what he did was he sent Lumpur Cha to go study with a couple of Lumpur Mun's disciples who were Mahanikai. And so there's these two in particular that Lumpur Cha went to stay with, and he really takes these monks to be his teachers. They were Lumpur Ginari and Lumpur Tongrat. And so Lumpur Ginari, from what I understand, he was a pretty quiet monk, didn't have many disciples, and a lot of his style was he was the example, and you'd have to watch him and learn from him, see what he was doing, and to learn that way. And from what I understand, Lumpur Tongrat was the exact opposite. And a lot of what we take now as the Ajahn Chah tradition and the ways Ajahn Chah did stuff, a lot of it actually came from Lumpur Tongrat. So you could say Lumpur Tongrat, he was almost kind of like a bit of that cliche, like eccentric Zen teacher. So some monks have found it really difficult to live with him because they couldn't quite understand him and understand his way of practice. So sometimes he'd make you do something, but he would do the opposite. So he would make the monks really uh, be really like restrained and quiet and stuff when they'd eat, but then he'd purposely eat sloppy. Or there's all these stories of him back when he was a disciple of Lumpur Man, and because he practiced very well and practiced very quickly too. And so there was this one story where one time the monks were on their morning alms round, and they were walking in the fields, like between the rice paddies, and there was some water buffalo there, because in the rice paddies you still see lots of water buffalo around. And Lumpur Tongrat pointed out one of the water buffaloes to the monks and said, "You see, that's a female water buffalo." And one of the monks was like, "No, no, Lumpur," and he was very respectful. He's like, "Lumpur, that's not a female water buffalo. That's a male water buffalo." you know, Pretty obvious differences, and um, Lumpur Tongrat's like, "No, no, that's a female water buffalo." And the monk's like, "No, no, Lumpur, I'm pretty sure that's a male water buffalo." And this kept going on. It kept going back and forth. And this monk just kept getting more and more worked up. From what I understand, he kind of really lost it at the end and just had a bit of a freak out over this. And he didn't understand that this was Lumpur Tongrat was actually trying to teach him. He thought, that the teacher was just wrong and he was going to point it out to him. But he didn't realize that this was a really teaching Lumpur Tongrat trying to give him, and the monk completely missed it. So it was this idea and this concept of, would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy? This idea of, holding on to our views and trying to push them so hard and argue and trying to always be right. Um, and we can really hold on to that, and we can really create a lot of suffering for ourselves in our lives with this wanting to be right, because we create so much of a sense of self around our opinions, our views. And when we feel that we're wrong, it can be very painful. And we can create so much problems for ourselves and other people in our lives just by this always wanting to be right. The other story I really like for this was one Ajahn Brahm would tell about the chicken and the duck. I told it the other week, but it's still a really good one. So this man and this woman are walking through the forest, and they hear a quack, quack, quack. And the man goes, "Oh, did you hear that? That was a chicken." And his wife goes, "No, no, no, that wasn't a chicken. Chickens go bok, bok, bok. That went quack, quack, quack. That's a duck." And the man's like, "No, no, no, it was a chicken." And then again they hear, the quack, quack, quack. And the man's like, you see, that was a chicken." And the lady's like, "No, no, no, dear, that's not a chicken. That's a duck." And the man keeps getting more and more worked up. And again, they hear the quack, quack, quack. And the man's really angry now. He's like, you see, that's a chicken." And the lady's like, you're right, you're right. That is a chicken." And and I'm not trying to say that chickens go quack, 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 but it was the idea that she had a lot more wisdom than he did, and she knew that there was no point in arguing, no point in creating all this all these problems over something so little. And but you see, again, we do it so much because we have so much of this sense of self we create around so many things, our opinions, our views, so many parts of our life. And you can see it sometimes really clear in people with certain things. So you can see, um, I noticed particularly stuff like music or sports teams. So I noticed, when I was a layman, back in high school, I knew people who, if someone said that they didn't like a particular band that this person liked, I mean, it would be a big argument. They'd be personally offended if you said you didn't like such and such a band, or you didn't like that song, because or you see it with people with their sports teams. People get so invested in these sports teams that if you were to say, "Oh, yeah, that sports team, I don't like them, or they're no good," I mean, that's fighting words. There are actual fights start over stuff like that, and people get hurt because we start creating this sense of self around these things. In Pali, we call it ahankara mamankara. So this I making and mind making. So we're constantly attaching to things, and this becomes us. This becomes part of us. Our likes, our interests are all part of us. And we're doing it all the time, and we're not really aware of it. To me, one of the times when it became the most clear to me that I was doing this, I had no idea about this. I had no idea I was doing it until I first went to go stay in the monastery. Because, in my life, I had been creating all this identity, all this sense of self around this is me, these are my interests, this is the music I like, this is the way I dress, these are, I was a vegetarian at the time. So, all these things I created such a sense of self around. And then, I go and stay in the monastery, and all these things are basically taken away. We don't listen to music anymore. We don't go out and do all these activities anymore. Sense of clothes and style. I mean, we all dress the same. It's all just robes now. There is no personal style. Shave the head off. We even went as far as to we change our names when we ordain. And I even noticed there was attachment to my name. And so you really see how much it's just this like function of the mind, and just this constantly creating a sense of self. And then we create a lot of suffering over that. This I have to be right, and we want people to see things the way we see them. And especially from what I've seen, especially it's with people that we're closest with and we care about the most. If we have a certain view, we have a certain liking, we want other people to believe the same way we are, see things the same way we do. So, if you have someone you care about, and they get into some different belief on something, you see it very strongly in politics. Someone gets into a different political view than you, and you can feel hurt by it, feel offended by it, and you want to change their minds and get them back, get them to believe what you believe. Um, I remember in a number of years ago in Thailand, for a long time, the country was very split between two political factions, the red shirts and the yellow shirts. And it was getting really, really bad. And in a lot of Thai culture and a lot of other Asian cultures, family is really important, and they put a lot of emphasis on family. And I was talking to this one Thai man, and he was saying that he has some relatives who are red shirts and some relatives who are yellow shirts, and it's gotten so bad that they can't even they won't speak to each other anymore. They won't be in the same room, and they won't speak to each other anymore. So they've become so attached to these views and these, I'm right, you're wrong, that they've sacrificed these relationships in their life. So it's important for us to um, create some mindfulness around this. And you can start to, once you start to kind of become aware of this, becoming aware of what we attach to and stuff, you can just be more mindful about it and start trying to let go of it, trying to not bring this up as an issue, not attach to it so firmly and so strongly. And but and so um because it does create so much problems. And if you look at it, this sense of self, the sense of these things, that you're so attached to and you hold so dear, you have to remember these are impermanent. They're always changing. So, for example, you look at the stuff that you took as very important, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, back when you're a teenager in high school, and you look at it now, and it's completely changed. A lot for most people, a lot of the values, a lot of everything has changed. I remember many years ago reading an article, and it was about some of these famous pictures of the hippies from the 1960s, and from like the Summer of Love, or from some of those big famous protests. And they had actually tracked people down from these pictures, and went and asked them and to see if they still believe these things. And almost all of them didn't. Almost all of them were, had gone in very, very different political views from that, and were living very different lifestyles from what they did as teenagers. Or you can see it, a teenager, they go and get a tattoo of something which is so important and so meaningful for them, and then 10, 20 years later they're in there getting it covered up or getting it removed because because again we change. And so it's important to be aware of that these things aren't self, that these things are changing, and that really attaching to these are creating, this suffering, this dukkha. And these are the three characteristics. So, trying to look at the three characteristics in these things we attach to, in this sense of self we're creating, because at the end of the day we want to reduce our suffering. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that in every situation that you come in life, you have to be like the lady and saying, and just going along with the way other people see it, being like the lady with the chicken and the duck and saying, okay, yeah, it's a chicken. So sometimes, when we get teachings, we can sometimes um, pick them up in the wrong way, or take them a little too far. The simile that's used is, it's like picking up a with teachings, it's like picking up a knife. If you pick up a knife by the handle, it's a great tool and you can do lots of things with it. But if you pick it up by the blade, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to cut yourself. And it's the same, they use also the simile for, it's like with a snake, you have to pick the snake up from the head, not from the tail. So with these teachings, we have to pick them up in the right way. So, it doesn't mean that, if your boss says, why didn't you do this project for me? It's and you actually did do it. It doesn't mean you have to be like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't do it. You can be like, oh, actually, yeah, it's over there, And so we do have to develop wisdom and learn like the time and place for using certain teachings. And yeah, I'd like to offer that to everyone for tonight as a bit of a reflection.